Alright, so today what we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys my Engine Analyzer Pro software that I use from Performance Trends. I've been using this for quite some time, and it's taken probably about a year or two to really dial in the numbers to match what's actually on the Mustang dyno. Obviously I'm at 5,000 feet out here in Utah, so I try to run my numbers up here. And then base my performance off of that. Will my numbers obviously be higher at sea level? Yes. So I like to keep it the same. So if my numbers look low compared to everybody else's stuff, that's just the way it is. But anyway, we're going to show you Performance Trends software here, and a couple of things we'll go through. First of all, I've got one of my combinations pulled up for a 408 here. I run EQs, ported stage 1 heads. I've got a stage 1 ported Kegger with the 108 millimeter on it. I'm running long tube headers and the UTP 500X cam, so it's higher lift, 512 lift. So let's get through some of the specs here on this motor here, and then we'll run a couple of numbers, and then we'll show you exactly what the difference in the intake runner length is going to do. And you're going to see the major difference. So let's go into the short block first. So the short block got a 403 bore, it's 4030, 4-inch stroke on the crank, 8. I'm choosing 3 lower tension, typical skirt, no coating on the pistons, low leakage because it's brand new. I do run SRT4 fans on the ram, and I've got a crank pulley set up on there too. So you can pretty much use these same settings that I have here. You can change that to a 362 with a 358 stroke. For the heads, I've got the flow table for the intake and for the exhaust here. So the flow table for the intake is exactly off of PIE's website. I've listed their numbers for their flow on their stage 1 head, and for the exhaust flow on the stage 1 head that they send also. It is a compact wedge. I calculated compression, and I'll show you how I did this. The CCs in the heads are 62. I have a negative 23 dish for the Icon 408 stroker piston. I'm using a Felpro right now, so it's a 45. You probably can get a maybe a 43 squish out of that. So you're about 9.90. Obviously, if you run the Mr. gasket 27, 28, you'll be around 10.2, which is actually a pretty good bump in compression right there. So let's run the 28 gasket. I am 0 decked, so I am 10.20 compression here. So we're going to click OK. That puts that right in there to 10.20. Cast iron, typical burning. You can change these numbers, but I usually just leave them all the same. For my intake specs, basically we chose a single plenum EFI, and I've got a 14-inch runner. And the calculated diameter was basically from the 2.38 CSA straight runners merged to the head. So that's how I basically do a lot of my work on the intake manifold. The reduced heat, obviously I'm running the VRP shield, and we run the 1285 CFM 108 millimeter. And the CCs from 2000 to 2500 pretty much don't change anything. I try to keep that CC volume amount with the VRP plates and the wedge. The wedge made a big difference to get me down into the 2500 or less plenum volume, which seems to be extremely responsive on the street when it comes to torque and throttle response. Could Dodge have done a better job with this? Yeah, but they weren't after the same results that we're looking for on the street. They released the trucks with 33-inch tires to 35s and 38s like we have. But anyway, so this is my intake specs for it. We'll go to the exhaust specs, which is my DNA long tubes, which are pace setters, 1.75 inch. And I run open because I've got MagnaFlows straight out the back of that thing. So there's not much that changes there. Now when you look at the UTP 500X cam, These are the numbers straight from my cam card. Input in here, aggressive hydraulic roller, because I run a fast extreme energy load profile roller on that camshaft, 507 lift on this cam. And I installed this cam straight up, and I can play around with this, and I can move my power band up and down, which is kind of cool. But we'll show you. I'm just going to do straight up on the 508X, or excuse me, the 500X cam. We're going to play with this at the very last part and show you what 5 psi will do with the blower that's in the shop. So anyway, when you calculate performance, when you set up, I use their standard dyno. Just preview it. It's 15 steps right here. Use the 91 octane gasoline setup. Spark giving best power. I can actually punch in my specs from my SCT software right into here also. So once that's set up, click calculate. It's going to go through the calculations, and you're going to see a lot of numbers being built. The key thing to watch is look where the peak torque is at and where it sits at with this 408. So there you have it. We had 509 horsepower at pretty much 5,000 RPM with this manifold, and we got almost 600 foot-pounds of torque at 3,500 RPM. If you want to look at it on the graph, you can see some kind of funky stuff going on here, and I'm sure I can dial that in the software. But you can see that compression is what really makes this jump a lot. Matter of fact, let's just back it up a little bit. Let's go back into our compression real quick. We're using 10.2 right now. Let's go ahead and make that a 10.6 compression. Let's say you took some of the CC out and you went for like a negative, instead of a negative 23 dish on that piston, you went for the one that's got a negative 10 cc dish. So let's see what happens when we just bump it from 10.2 to 10.6 compression. Look at that, 603 foot-pounds of torque. Compression is torque at the end of the day. So you can see it doesn't really do a whole lot like people think, but I think it does. It's a very noticeable gain. You're going to notice going from 500 horsepower to 515 horsepower, and you were at 599 before, and now you're at 603. So it's actually pretty good just to look and be very conservative when it comes back to that. Was it intake? No. Let's go back. Get out of intake. Head specs. There we go. Let's go back down to 10.2. Let's just call it 10.0. Because that's right where I'm going to be around. Let's go ahead and run those numbers. So here we go, 3,300 RPM, 3,500 RPM, that truck is making max torque right there. So that's a very, very good streetable setup right there for a 408. Now if I change the runner length, what's going to happen is it's going to move it. So if I put on a M1 4-barrel manifold or an Edelbrock air gap, I'm going to move that peak torque from right there from 3,500 to 4,500. So watch what happens. I mean, your horsepower is going to go up, but your peak torque is going to drop. So watch this 507, 593. So let's go back. Let's change our intake runner to a standard 8-inch. Okay, calculate. So you're going to see the horsepower is going to increase on it. We're going to lose some torque, but the peak torque is also going to move up to around 44, 4,500 RPM. Well, look at that. 4,800 RPM. 574. So we're not making 600 foot-pounds of torque, but we are making 542 horse, and we're making 574. Now, does that mean the truck's not responsive? It's still making 500 foot-pounds of torque at 3,000 RPM. So yes, absolutely. M1 Performance Manifold would work great with that. But for responsive driving on the street, for slower driving where you're not playing up past that RPM, like even on this one, peak one right here, we should look at that 5,300 RPM. You're at your peak horsepower right there. So should I be shifting at 6,000 RPM? No, not with this cam profile. So let's go back, and what you saw before was the 14-inch. So what happens when I change to a 13-inch runner? Let's see what happens. What's basically going to happen is you're going to move your peak torque. It's going to start climbing. So instead of 3,500, it's going to, yeah, there you go, 3,800. It's going to go on up. So I'm still not making 600 torque where I was, but I'm just shortening the runner by 1 inch. I moved to my peak torque to 3,800, and I made a few more horsepower. So this is where you can learn to play with stuff. So when I go to a 15-inch runner, which is stock, everybody says 18, but it's not. But watch my video. It's actually, when you calculate the long side and the short side and you divide the two and average, it's a 15-inch runner. And so here it is, bone stock. 15-inch runner is going to peak out at 3,500 RPM, roughly right there, 587. It's still not in the 590s. So if you just put on a stock kegger and you did not do anything to it other than reduce the volume in it down to 2,000 cc's with some VRPs in it, without milling any of the length of the runner down, there you sit, 502, 589 torque. That's still very impressive. And I'm not sure why it's showing 4,589. What's this? Yeah, 4,000. Yeah, it's a weird graph. Oh, because it's peaking right there. So something's missing right here. I'm not sure what we got to clean up in the software to get that. But so basically, you're going to see 14-inch, which is on my video, how to get the 14-inch runner, is going to be the best horsepower torque combo at a lower RPM. Let's see what happens here. 3,500, we're at 593. Yeah, there you go. So the 14-inch seems to be the best combination for a street-driven truck or off-road setup. And obviously I've said it 1,000 times, when you are rock crawling, you know, it's nice to have the horsepower to get up over certain whoops and stuff like that, but when I want to creep slow, going up over hills, you know, keep it at 3,500, that's where my pulling power is, right there. So here we are, 507, 593. So now let's play with your cam timing. So this is where it gets fun. So everybody goes, oh, you know, what should I install my cam at? Straight up, and I always tell them straight up. So let's do 4 degrees advance. Watch what happens to the power. Watch what happens when I advance. We're just everything the same, but 4 degrees spark advance, cam timing advance. So look what happened to the horsepower. So I'm making 489 horsepower at 595. So I'm making some more spark advance because I'm making more cylinder pressure down at a lower RPM. So let's watch what happens when I retard the cam. I actually had problems trying to get this video set up right. This was driving me nuts. And pretty much was real grainy, terrible. Anyway, here we go. Here's retarding the cam. So what's going to happen is your peak RPM is going to rise. So pretty much between 35 and 4,000 now is going to be peak torque. Well, look at there, 4,300. 4,300. And look at the horsepower difference in retarding the cam. So just playing around with your setup, you can move your power band where you want it. So in the case of this one here, yeah, you're making 517 horse and 592 torque, but you're making it at 4,300. Doesn't matter, it's still making freaking 542 torque at 3,000 RPM. So you can see, playing with your cam timing, that this makes a big difference. So let's go back. This is not the best camshaft for supercharging, but let's just show you. Let's go back to straight up. Click that. Let's take that supercharger that's in the shop right now that we're putting on the Indy manifold. So I've got a Roots supercharger. I am going to set it for 5 pounds only. Just 5 pounds. Watch what happens with this motor. Look at the efficiency. It's already over 100% being boosted. So there you have it. 682 at 3,000 RPM, just holding steady all the way to 4,500 right there. Amazing. So 619 horse, 684 torque. You better have some 4-bolt main caps or splayed caps installed on that block, because that crank is going to want to explode out of the bottom. And I can tell you from running many turbos on many of my 408s in the past that those caps do try to push out and walk. You can see cap walk when you get over 500 torque. So it's a lot worse when you get into boosted applications than when you're doing it on motor. Motor, you can get away with hovering around the 500 mark, but you want to take it down within a year or 2 years and take a look. Just pull a cap and see if you have any scruffing on the side of the cap, any signs of it showing that it's trying to lift. So, but with a supercharged setup like this right here, you can see that's absolutely perfect for moving a 7,500 pound Ram with big tires. I don't know if you're running 35s or 37s or 38s, but that right there is a wonderful combination for it. And that's not even the best camshaft for it, because that overlaps on 108, so it bleeds off some of the boost. So let's just go back. Let's change the specs on that Roots. Let's go ahead and just give it a mild 8 psi for the street, running through an intercooler. Okie dokie. 8 pounds. Ooh, it's the mark of the beast number there, 666. Let's get away from that number. So look at there, we're still sitting at 680s. See the difference on that? So adding boost in a certain setup is not always going to give you more power. So we're still sitting around the same area right there. So there's no need to run 8 psi on that setup right there. Come on. Uh-oh. There we go. 627, 685. Nope. Go back to none. Let's go back down to all motor, no boost. There you go, 593. This is let's see if we can get that 593 to tickle 600 here. Do that by advancing the cam 2 degrees. This is with the keyway set up. Let's see what happens. 2 degrees of spark, 2 degrees of timing advance. Let's see what kind of cylinder pressure it makes. Come on. 595. That's close. It's about as close as we're going to get on this one. So you can see this 408 is making a healthy amount of torque with the 14-inch runner. So I hope you enjoyed this video. you can purchase this software from Performance Trends website. It is a little expensive, but it's worth it. It helps me decide where I want to be, and then once I get done, like this combo here, this one's going together in the shop right now. Once you go together with this and you go on the dyno, you can calculate your horsepower loss on the Mustang dyno and dial in your numbers here to match that. And I did this like probably 2 years ago, matching all my numbers. So the head specs in here are pretty much exactly where they need to be. So my numbers really match. So what you would make on an engine dyno here compared to what you make on the chassis dyno is pretty darn close. I mean within 5%. So just, your weather obviously changes on the dynos. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll do another one on the SCT software. Obviously, you guys have heard that Sight is no longer supporting the handhelds anymore. It's too bad. I really enjoyed using their stuff. So that leaves HP Tuners and SCT, and hopefully they still think that our trucks are worth tuning. So continue to buy their software and their SCT handhelds, the 3200, and show them that we want to continue to be able to tune these trucks. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.